Hi guys, it's Jill, and welcome back to the Equine in Theory podcast. This week's episode, we are discussing my thoughts, feelings, experiences, and what I learned at the Alexandra Kurland clinic that I was just at. So yeah, let's just jump into it. Alrighty, ladies and gents, I'm going to start off by saying that this might be all over the place because I have had the longest week of my life, and I am recording this Monday night, and I'm going to do the best I can to stay on topic and give you guys as much information as possible because I know a lot of you are really interested and very excited about this, but my brain is all over the place, and I already took 2 exams today, so this is what I get for procrastinating. So I'm sorry if this isn't the most fantastic podcast episode that we have had thus far, but I'm going to do my best. So just give me a break. All right. So I went to an Alexandra Kurland clinic, which is pretty freaking dope. For starters, it's pretty awesome to be able to work under someone who is like the founder or the first to do or the first to write a book on something that is new, I guess. Karen Pryor was really the one that brought clicker training to the public eye, and she wrote books about it and everything, and Kurland was the first one to do that with horses, and she wrote many books about positive reinforcement with horses and that sort of thing. And that's how I learned about her. And I have skimmed through some of her books. I have not had time this semester to sit down and read them all the way through, but I've skimmed bits and pieces of all 3 of them because I have them because I'm a book nerd. And so I also listen to her podcast, EquiTheory, and you can listen to it as well. It's a really insightful and pretty good podcast to listen to if you're a behavioral science nerd like us. So I signed up for her clinic, and I was super excited about it, and I took both Mac and Zoe, and me and Sunny, my boss, stayed in the trailer all weekend, so we were on site the entire weekend. And Cindy Martin, who hosted the clinic, made us food every single day for 3 meals a day, and she is a wonderful human. She was like the greatest hostess. I have never been to a clinic where the host literally prepares you breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and she was fantastic. I also learned a ton from her as well. I have my notes here in front of me of like sort of what I took from the clinic, and I'm going to get to those, but I kind of just want to run through my experience at the clinic because it's not your average, take your horse to, a eventing clinic, and then you get there, you might do a light ride the first day, and then the second day you do show jumping or cross country or dressage or whatever, and then the next day you do one of the other 3. Usually it's just show jump and cross country, which is interesting because most of us eventers need most work in dressage. But so it wasn't like that at all. We got there on Friday evening, and we settled in the horses and everything, and then we went inside for dinner, and we all sat around the table and kind of discussed our goals and everything. And the biggest topic that came up was, I'm going to the Retired Racehorse Project with Mac. And I've been in this position lately where I haven't seriously publicized it, but in the months that I've spent working with Mac, I anticipated a lot more progress. And to be frank with you, I don't know. I hope you interpret it the way that I'm intending for it to be interpreted, but it's not due to positive reinforcement failing. It's due to he's starting so far behind most other horses. Like where I started with Zoe, we can just sort of shoot off and just do things differently and, excel in what we're doing. And her progress has been slow because I have tons of other horses to work with. And since Mac is the priority, she's gotten put on the back burner. But with Mac, he's starting so far behind because he's head shy, he's reactive, he's like really afraid of you touching him anywhere. He doesn't like it when you're up higher than him, like on a mounting block. And he's just he's just afraid. And it seems like, and I mean, you know, I start my horses with targeting, and the first time I held up a target, he bolted the opposite direction, and I was like, all right, we will start with something that's not on a stick that looks like a whip. So, you know, it doesn't really matter what happened to him exactly, but if I were to theorize, it would be whips, ear twitching, and shanking. Because he's just jumpy. Like, anytime you move around him, he's like, oh God, don't hit me. So, I've had to start by working through all of that. I can't, you know, just go to, let's desensitize the saddle if me lifting my arm scares him, and let alone lifting something onto his back. Sure, he's had it done thousands of times before, but has it been comfortable for him? Has it been a positive experience? You know, so that's been a challenge. And I brought that up to them because I was like, all these positive reinforcement gurus, somebody tell me what to do. But honestly, I got the answer I was expecting. That was like, do you feel like you're going to compromise the horse for this competition? And, you know, I've been thinking about that, and all my positive reinforcement friends and mentors have been saying the same thing. You know, are you going to have to compromise Mac in order to meet this goal? Like, what truly matters to you? And to some degree, it's not necessarily up to me. I'm not the one paying for him to go to the show, and he's not my horse. And so, you know, he's gonna have to go. But it was more just like, I don't know that I am going to be able to do everything the way that I want to do it in order to make this goal happen, which is sort of heartbreaking. But you know, I went into this completely blind. I anticipated getting like an off the track, like many I have before, that are the most level-headed, kind horses. I mean, that's the only kind that I've ridden off the track. We don't really get any crazy thoroughbreds that are just like insane. But, and you know, Mac isn't either. He's just kind of like, he's kind of scared. And that was super southern. Enjoy that. He's super like nervous. So we're starting way farther back than we would have, and I'm doing everything in my power to create, you know, good positive associations with everything that we need to do. You know, like, I need to be able to put a saddle on him, a halter, a bridle. I need to be able to lead him around and, you know, get on him and eventually do a jump course and that sort of thing. And the goal is to do all of that on the ground first, so that he has the clearest understanding of what I'm asking of my cues, and so that that's all laid out for him, and we have a nice solid foundation, and then we can start adding, you know, the boards and the brick and mortar and make it a big house. You know, we're laying the foundation right now, and hopefully that will make him more resistant to fear in the future, because the goal is to be able to make him a happy, confident horse who's not afraid that people are going to do bad things to him. And since he's not afraid, and since he will have been taught how to behave correctly, he won't be as likely to encounter situations where he's, you know, quote unquote in the wrong, and someone is going to feel the need to punish him or get rough with him. And so it would just be a better outcome for him overall. And that's my goal, is to make him a happy, confident horse. And that really got solidified this weekend. That's what I want to do. I want to make his life better through this competition. And I also want to bring that positive reinforcement based training can be, you know, attainable. And yeah, it can take longer, and it can be a little more difficult, because I'm not just saying, deal with it, horse. I'm going to throw the saddle on you, throw the bridle on you, and just ride you until you realize that you're not going to die. And, you know, I could do that. The thing is with Mac, I just see a lot of potential emotional fallout with that. You know, because he's come so far, but I can just see with doing that, just based on how many interactions I've had with him, that just doing that, maybe now he would be more okay with it. But if I had just done that right when I'd gotten him, you know, I would have been dealing with a very anxious, stressed, and fearful horse. And then he probably would have ended up a ride a lot like Zoe, who was just like tight-backed and open-mouthed and tail swishing and just clearly uncomfortable. And I just want him to understand that this is not a bad thing, and that we're going to do things that earn him reward, and that we're in this together, you know. So yeah, that's my extremely long tangent. Really sorry about that, but I feel like that's really important to clear up, because I don't think it's worth it to rush through this. And I know everyone and their grandmother has been asking me when I'm going to ride him, and how am I going to do this competition if I haven't ridden him yet. And my answer to that is we're getting there. And the summer just hit, and I'm going to be spending a whole lot of my time working with him and formulating plans and figuring out how we're going to get there by October. So everyone can just cool their jets. This is my journey, not yours. So sorry to be blunt, but that is my rant on that, and I will stop now because I'm supposed to be talking about the clinic. So anyway, the next day was our quote-unquote data collecting day, where we kind of just went out to the horses to see where they were at and find holes in the training and see what we needed to work on. Alex likes to say, you know, people for opinions, horses for answers. So let's go to the horses and see what they're telling us they need to work on. And we got a whole lot of stuff because Zoe, who at home, when they were paddock together, could not stand Mac. She kicked out at him all the time. He would run up on her and bite her on the butt, and they just had like this antagonistic relationship. But when we trailered them there and we got them in stalls, like the setup was that there was a stall, and each of the stalls had like a run out, so it had like a little paddock behind it, like not really a paddock, like a stall sized outdoor enclosure, like that had fence panels and stuff. So they could both go outside and see each other, but they couldn't see each other when they were inside. And, you know, I brought Zoe into the stall and Mac was outside, and she quickly lost her marbles because she couldn't see him. And I was like, oh dear. So we ended up having to work outside and over the fence. And, yeah, we really just worked on seeing where the horses were at and if we could get anything accomplished. And, we did that for a little while, and then we took them both to the arena after lunch, and Cindy led Mac around in the arena so that they wouldn't have to be separated, and Alex worked with Zoe a little bit, and to be quite honest with you, my memory is failing me, which sucks. I can't remember everything that we worked on. That weekend was full of stuff. I'm talking, we got started at 7 a.m. and did not stop until 10 p.m. So it was a long day every single day, and the clinic was 4 days long. So, you know, Alex worked on a little bit of head lowering, some mat work, and leading, I believe. I think she was more just trying to get to know Zoe and see where she was at and that sort of thing. So yeah, and I got to watch a few more demos from other people. I mean, they weren't demos, they were participating in the clinic, but for me it was a demo because they were, you know, riding and showing how their horses just line up at the mounting block with no direction. They don't need to be held, they just line up and wait for you to get on. A lot of hip targeting was a really big thing for me this weekend, and I'll talk about that in a second. And, you know, doing lateral work in hand on the ground before you transfer it to the saddle. And, yeah, there was just a lot of, like, really cool things that you do with your horse on the ground. And that's the thing that I love about clicker training and positive reinforcement. And, you know, of course, in traditional training, there's a lot of work done on the ground, especially in classical dressage. But for the most part, at least the way that I was brought up, my extent of groundwork was lunging and sometimes ground driving, but not anything like this. Like, you know, in my opinion, throwing a Pessoa system on or side reins, which I have used frequently in the past, it just doesn't accomplish the same thing as clicking and rewarding the horse for small adjustments in their self-carriage, in my opinion. Because, you know, once you take those gadgets off, what do you have? You might have a stronger horse, but a horse that's probably not going to go into that position, you know, without some rein pressure or leg pressure or something like that. Whereas in clicker training, you have a higher likelihood that the horse is going to want to carry themselves the way that you've been rewarding, because they get rewards for doing it. So I think that is a quicker, clearer way for the horse to self-carriage. And I learned a lot about that this weekend. So that was really cool. So after all of that was over and done with, when we were sitting around the dinner table after we had all finished and we were kind of talking, they decided to play this Portal game, which is, I believe, coming from the University of North Texas with Dr. Jesus Rosales Ruiz and Mary Hunter, who is actually at the clinic, and she showed us how to play this game. And essentially you have like this like little mason jar with a cap full of like trinkets, like slinkies and toy cars and just all of this random stuff. And essentially you have one person leave the room, and then Mary would tell us what she was going to train Alex to do. So Alex would leave the room. She would tell us what her training plan was. I have 3 things that I want her to flip over, 3 objects she needs to flip over and then put in my hand. And then after she does that, I want her to put all 3 objects into the slinky. So what she did was, when Alex came back, she put a toy car upside down. And so obviously Alex had in her own personal repertoire to flip that back over. That's not how it's supposed to be, right? So she set up something so obvious that Alex was like, oh, I know what to do with this. So she flipped it over, and then she got clicked and quote unquote treated. And this may sound very juvenile, but it was really good metaphorically, for me at least. And so they did that a few repetitions, and then Mary gave her something else that was really obvious that it was upside down. I think she may have had a button that was upside down. I don't know. You can see it in the YouTube video. I posted one. So go watch that of day 1, and then I'll have day 2 up next week. But not day 2, part 2. Anyway, so she gave her another object, and then Alex naturally flipped that over and got clicked and treated, and then she switched those out for a different object, and she flipped that over, and then she laid out 2 objects, and then got those flipped, and then 3, and worked up progressively until Alex was flipping all 3 of them over, and then she would get clicked after she flipped the 3rd one. So after that little set, Mary took away all of the objects except one and set it out, and Alex flipped it over, and then Mary held out her hand, and obviously to Alex that said, give it to me. So she put the like little, I think it was a Lego, in Mary's hand, and then she got clicked and reinforced. So that was sort of a like little chain, if you will. I know we don't like that word. We prefer loopy training, but it seemed more like a chain to me. So she had to flip it over and then hand it to Mary. So she did that, and then she gave her the 3 back, and then she put out a slinky, and then Alex would flip them and then put them in the slinky, and then clicked and reinforced, and that was it. So that was really insightful, because we also had somebody else do it, and then we had them write down their thoughts and feelings during the exercise. And at one moment, this lady that was doing it, she went, oh, and we all thought that she had just had an epiphany and was like, oh, I got it. But actually, she was so confused because she had just done something that she didn't think was correct and got clicked. And so she was super confused. And to me, that was just the biggest example of, you can so easily misinterpret what you're seeing, and you never know exactly how your learner is feeling, especially with animals, because they can't tell you. And so we can only do our best to observe them and try and label it correctly. But really, it's up to the learner of what feels good and what doesn't. And something else that was super interesting is, I forget what she had her doing. I think she had her placing an object on top of a cork. And she did that so many times. She did it 20 repetitions or something like that. And she wrote down that she was frustrated and bored and was not understanding why it wasn't, what the purpose was. Why isn't this going anywhere? And then Mary, who was the trainer, was like, well, I saw hesitation, and I thought you weren't quite clear on what we were doing, so I introduced more repetitions. But that was also interesting, because I think it's thought-provoking to consider that horses may potentially get bored, and I say that carefully, but I also know that Zoe is like that. If I ask her to do the same thing over and over and over again, she'll be like, all right, let's do something new, either by expressing that by leaving or starting to get sort of a grumpy facial expression. So I think that was really important to consider, that once they've got it down, they're like, all right, can we do something else now? This is getting to be juvenile. So the other thing that this little game exercise thing made me consider was that, the emotional state has the potential to change, because when you first start out with them, it may seem like they're just like, I don't know, I'm unsure, I'm not confident. For a human learner, she was embarrassed a little bit that she wasn't like getting it faster, that she was having to do it over and over again. But, I would be interested to see if she had done a few sessions of learning different things and being asked to do different tasks, if she would get more confident in both the trainer, in that the trainer was going to ask her something that she could solve, and in her own ability to solve the puzzle. And I think that that's also important for horses too, because, at first you start asking them to do something and they're like, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. And then after they catch on to the game, they're so like in it. They're like, this is awesome. Let's keep doing this. Ask me to do something else and I'll solve it. So I think that that's also really important to consider, that you need to set up experiments, quote unquote, or training sessions that, that the horse has in repertoire, or shape to, introduce it to their repertoire so that they can do it. Because if you ask something too hard, then you're potentially taking away some of that confidence, and then you have to build that back up. And it's really important that you have a confident learner who wants to participate, because if they're not confident that they can solve it, they're probably not going to participate. It's the flow theory. Another psychological thing for you there. Anyway, I need to move on to Sunday. That was a really cool, metaphorical thing. I don't know if you guys will find that interesting at all, but I did. And I thought it was really insightful. Anyway, Sunday. So we started out around the breakfast table and we watched some lectures and PowerPoint presentations, that sort of thing. And then we went down to the barn and we had a lesson in rope handling. And you guys will really be able to see more of that in part 2 of my clinic video, which will be up next Monday, because it's really hard to explain without a visual, and even with a visual, it's just not the same as feeling it. Like, if I had watched this video, I would have been like, okay, so what's the big deal? But actually feeling it and being led around, again, this all sounds super juvenile, but it really made a difference in how I think about these things. But essentially, one of us would hold the halter above the clip, so we weren't hanging on to the lead rope at all, just holding on to the halter, and then we would have our fists clenched really tight and have our eyes closed, and Cindy would slide her hand down the rope and she would say, let me know when you can feel me on the rope at all. And with my fist clenched, white knuckling it, I didn't feel her at all until her hand hit mine. She had slid all the way up the lead rope to my hand, and she went slow, and I didn't feel anything. And then she said, okay, relax your hands and be super feel like you're holding a baby bird, and let me know when you feel me. And she slid up the lead rope and she got a foot down it, and I said, now. And I have a whole other 8 foot of lead rope. And I was like, oh. So the point there is that tension on either party, tension on the horse or tension on the human's part, you can't feel the other as well. The horse can't feel the human if they're tense, and the human can't feel the horse if they're tense. I know my pronoun antecedent isn't very clear there, but you're less susceptible to noticing small changes if you're tense. And I thought that was pretty brilliant. And so the next thing we did was practice rope handling, and it's really a lot to explain, and you're probably better off watching a video or attending a clinic of it, because it's really something that you have to feel and experience for yourself. I have a lot of footage of me doing it with Cindy's mare Scout and with Zoe. But essentially you have one hand that's your quote-unquote minuet hand that sort of just floats with the horse, and moves with them, and the goal is to keep the snap of the lead rope pointing straight down, so it's perpendicular to the ground, and that just keeps a light, flowy contact. It's like you're dancing with them. And then when you want to say turn or ask for lateral flexion or slow down or walk forward, you slide your hand up the rope, and that slide is intended to let the horse know that I'm about to ask you something. And then if you sort of tilt the snap forward so the end of it is pointing towards the horse's mouth, that indicates to them to move forward. If you tilt it up, it indicates them to sort of whoa up or stop. And if you slide your hand up and tilt the bottom of the snap towards you, then the horse can turn towards you. And if you tilt it away and float your minuet hand up to their shoulder, then they will move away or offer you lateral flexion, in the horses that are more experienced to this. And I thought it was a really cool experience because I've never led a horse that way. And, I've slid my hand down it and whatnot accidentally and not done anything intentionally. But to be so deliberate and to, slide down the rope to say, hey, horse, something is coming. And I'm not just going to grab the lead rope and turn it or pull it or what have you. And when you're holding the halter in your own hands, when somebody just reaches up and grabs the lead rope, it's kind of surprising. And it's a little bit like, oh, geez. But when they start at the other hand and slide up the lead rope, it's a lot more pleasant. And, I figure that some horses probably could care less about this, and I figure that some horses might really enjoy this, and I think Zoe is one of them. At least if this is a step towards being as light as possible, I think that this is much better than the way that I was rope handling previously. Because, I would just grab and we're on a walk. But now it's more deliberate, and I'm like, hey, I'm about to ask you something. And she's like, oh, what are you about to ask me? And if I tilt it forward, she's like, okay, let's go. And if I tilt it tilt it towards me, she's like, oh, okay, I turn. And, the second the horse breathes almost the right answer, you drop the rope or you let go gently, but that would be the part of negative reinforcement that's involved in this. And they're still clicking and treating. And honestly, if I'm being 100%, clear here, I don't really know how much I enjoy using negative reinforcement. And, to some extent, I feel like being a positive reinforcement purist is frowned upon. And to some extent, I think mixing is frowned upon. And honestly, I'm just sort of tired of the conflicting opinions, and I'm just sort of going to move to being as light and as clear with my horse as possible. And I would really like to minimize the amount of negative reinforcement I use. And using this form of negative reinforcement, the what Alex calls the Tai Chi Rope Handling that I've just spent the past 10 minutes describing, is a lot softer and kinder than the way that I was previously leading, and I didn't even realize it. And it is for sure negative reinforcement when you slide up and you tilt the clasp one way or another. It's a slight pressure, and I mean, there's something to be said about the difference between my hand on my knee pressure and pushing my finger into my knee pressure. Obviously, there's a difference there. The goal is to be non-escalating, so when you do this, you sort of just turn it and leave it. And when the horse takes a breath or takes a step forward or tenses their shoulder muscles or their chest muscles, then you release, and then you ask again, and then when they act like they're going to move forward or whichever direction you're asking, then you release. And I think it's polite negative reinforcement if there is one. But then we're clicking and treating afterwards. And I still don't really know how keen I am on that. However, I will say that watching Zoe's expression and her body for signals of relaxation and how calm she was, if she was stressed or anxious. She seemed very calm to me. Obviously, people for opinions, horses for answers. I don't know for sure, but she seemed very relaxed to me. And I really preferred that, and I had a blast working with her in this way because it was so much more fluid than the way that I've led her in the past. So I don't know. I don't know really how I feel about it, and I don't know. And I don't also want to be like, you know, I just went to this clinic and now I'm believing everything I hear and I'm like, yes, this is the only way. But I do know that Alex is a very accomplished and, respected trainer in the clicker training community. And I think that this is what she's found works best for her. And, I think that that's absolutely wonderful, and I am all about exploring it. I know you can hear a butt in my voice, but as I start this journey into positive reinforcement, I have become wary of just accepting other ideas and practices into my own, because, when I was writing traditionally, I just listened to everybody else and just did whatever the new thing was somebody told me to do, be it an Olympic athlete or be it Monty Roberts or someone like that, and I just did it, and I'm not like that anymore. I want to research and test and see how I feel about it on my own, how my horses feel about it. Like, that's priority numero uno. So, I think that it's a great way to transition from the regular way. I don't know how else to describe it, just kind of leading your horse around in general. I think that it definitely is much kinder, at least the way that I was able to do it with Zoe. I didn't use increasing pressure. I sort of, like I said, I just tilted the clasp and she responded. I didn't have to pull on her or increase the amount of pressure I was using. I just got to tilt it, and every time she did something correct, I would release and then click and treat. And so, I don't know. I don't want to offend here or say, I don't want to give off the vibe that Alex is wrong or anything like that, because I am definitely very new to this. But again, I am wary of just accepting what somebody else says is right. I want to find out for myself, and I want to see if I can find something that works even better than that. And that's my goal, know better to do better. What's that quote by Maya Angelou? We do the best with what we know, and when we know more, we can do better. Something like that. Paraphrasing very poorly. She's a poet, and I'm not. But yeah, so anyway, long story short, that was very cool, and I much prefer that to the way that I was leading. I do realize that it is negative reinforcement. I don't think that negative reinforcement is the devil, but I am of the mind that I would like to minimize it at all costs. If I can do it with positive reinforcement and without negative reinforcement, that's what I want to do. So when I find that way, then I will do it that way. But I have not explored enough or asked enough questions in how to do it without negative reinforcement. And, to some extent, I don't know if I need to do it without negative reinforcement. If, I don't know, because it still feels like a little bit of coercion to me, but Zoe didn't seem to, really hate it. That is very noisy. Shush. I don't know. I'm tangenting. Leave me alone. So to stop talking about Zoe finally, Alex was working with Mac, and he all of a sudden became the child that was no longer calm and was very concerned about where Zoe was and what she was doing. So I didn't really get to watch because I was really focused on Zoe, and I have yet to thoroughly review the footage, but he was very distracted and sort of all over the place. So we took them back to their stalls, and then after we did a few more horses, we went to work with him again, and Alex worked with him in the stall on what she calls backing in a square. So the goal is to teach the horse to yield his haunches when backing, and also to introduce head lowering. And they did that for a while, and the way that she did head lowering was similar to the Tai Chi Rope Handling. She would tilt the clasp up and just hold it there, and when he dropped his head, she would release. And I believe that the goal is to, when you're in the saddle, you can't really pull down on their heads. So when you tilt the rein up, that they lower their heads. And I think that there is something to that. However, just for me personally, I don't really know that I would teach it that way. And I'm not saying that there's anything particularly wrong with it. It's not the way that I think that I would like to teach it. I'd prefer to teach it with targeting, and I free shaped it with him and just taught him calm. So when I say calm, he puts his head down, and head lowering is a really awesome behavior because if you give it a super high reinforcement rate, then if you go to perhaps a scary environment and the horse is like, oh, I don't know what to do, and they get their heads a little high and you give them that cue, it's a conditioned emotional reinforcer as well. So when they put their heads down, they've had such a long history of reinforcers happening that position is, it's also a self-soothing position because horses put their heads down when they're calm, when they're not looking on the horizon for predators, but also that they've had such a high history of reinforcement that it's a good place to be, and they're like, oh, okay, everything is okay, I'm going to get treated for this is awesome. So it's a really useful behavior to teach. I prefer doing it without, the initial tilting of the clasp. I don't know. I think that is a little more confusing, and I think that other people would argue that free shaping is more confusing. I think it's to each his own. But I think I would prefer to teach it through a cue transfer, where I would have the calm cue and then introduce a rein cue or a tactile cue, like scratching his neck or something. I actually did that with, my first event horse. I accidentally taught him, I don't know how I did it, but when he would put his head down, I would scratch his withers. So over time, scratching his withers became the cue to put his head down. So when I was in dressage tests and we had to do a stretchy free walk or a stretchy trot, I would just reach down and scratch his withers and he'd drop his head. It was kind of awesome. But I would prefer to do something like that rather than have like a sort of a lift up and then they go down into the contact. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, and like I said, to each his own. I feel like I'm treading so lightly here, but I really don't want to give off the opinion or the vibe that I'm like, Alex is wrong and that was abusive. That's not the case at all. I think I would teach it differently, but I don't know. It's worked for her for like 20 years, so I mean, there must be something to it. I think the other things that we really worked on were, just cleaning up some of the treating techniques and how to communicate with your body language more clearly to the horse what you're asking. And then one of the most interesting things, to me anyway, was hip targeting. And I don't know why this just like really blew my mind a little bit. But there was a lady there named Karen, and she had the cutest little pony named Puffin, and I wanted to take him home. He was so cute. But she taught him how to target his hip. And the reason she did this is, you walk them up to a mounting block and their hip is too far away. So you hold out your hand and they move their hip over to touch your hand. And then suddenly they're lined up at the mounting block. I mean, there are 1,000 ways to teach a horse to stand at a mounting block, and there are 1,000 more ways to teach a horse to target your hip. But she explained how she did it by having him move around a cone. So it would be her, then Puffin in the middle, and then a cone or a mounting block or something on the outside. So Puffin was in between them, and she would ask him to move around, and she held out her little target. And when he walked around the cone, so he's turning away from her, around the cone that's inside, if this was a circle. I tried to explain this to a friend earlier and it did not make sense at all, so maybe just watch the video, but I'm gonna keep doing my best. So she's turning him away from her and holding out a target near his bum so that when he goes to step around the cone, eventually his hips swing over and bump the target. And then gradually she fades out the turning, and she just offers the target or says hip, and he moves his hip over and touches it. And then gradually she fades out the target, holds out her hand, and he just targets her hip. Or targets his hip to her hand. But she said to be warned to put this on stimulus control, because the last thing you want is to just be like talking to somebody with your hands and all of a sudden you have a horse butt in your hand. So definitely only needs to happen if you give them a tap or if you say hip. But I just thought that was really cool, and just a good way to teach that, because I've tried the just holding it out and waiting for them to shift, and I haven't had much success with that. And often with Zoe, since she's so adept at targeting, she'll just back up and then touch it with her nose. So I'm holding it at her hip, and she'll back up the length of her body to touch it with her nose, and I'm like, okay. So I don't know, I thought that was a creative way to do that, and I think that there are many more ways to do that, but that's just what she had. And then same thing with the standing at a mounting block. You sort of just walk up to it, and when the horse is there, click and reinforce, and then make it a really good place for the horse to be, and click and treat. And I got to watch a lot of riding. Nobody went super fast, and it wasn't like this big impressive, oh, we're doing a jumping course, so whatever. But it was really cool to see positive reinforcement done from the saddle. Most of it was done at a walk. There were some trots. The puff and pony focused mostly on lateral work and things of that nature. So, it was just really cool. And then on Monday morning, we got up, and my boss, Miss Sunny, had to get home because she had to take her kid to school on Tuesday morning. So we sort of did our session and got out of there, but I worked with Zoe some more on rope handling and refining it, and Alex worked with Mac more on the head lowering, and that was pretty much our whole clinic. And I think I touched on my notes as I went along through this. I also ordered some of the DVDs regarding, I think it's called Capture the Saddle, Hell in House Horse, and what's the other one? Riding on a Triangle. I'm not sure what that one is, but I know the other two are about mounting block and how to do the single rein riding, which I don't know a whole lot about, so I'm not really going to try and explain it. But essentially it's sort of just riding with one hand and then sliding your hand down the rope or rein, and cueing that way for turning. And it's very similar to the Tai Chi Rope Handling, so I find that will transfer really well to under saddle. And so I'm going to give that a go and test that out a little bit, test drive it, see what I think. I really think that is all I got for you guys. The clinic was really, really cool. I think I learned a lot of really valuable information. I got to meet a lot of really cool people, and I think that it was a really awesome clinic. And I don't really know what else to say. I feel like I'm ending on kind of a weird note here, but I've been talking for 43 minutes, so I'm probably gonna try and wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you are interested in attending one of Alex's clinics, I think she's got that up all over her website at the Clicker Center. Or you can message me about it, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But I think that is about all. Be sure that you check out those videos on my YouTube channel. It'll just be under Alexandra Kurland Clinic Part 1, and hopefully there will only be Part 2. I'm hoping I can condense it, but if not, then there will also be a Part 3. But yeah, be sure to check those out so that you have a visual aid to what I'm talking about here. And if you came from the videos, hopefully you have a clearer understanding of what we were trying to accomplish. They sort of go together. So yeah, make sure that you guys leave a positive review for this podcast for me. It really helps me in the algorithm, and I love to see that you guys, I actually read through the ratings and comments on the podcast the other day, and it just made my heart so happy. You guys are I don't even know what to say. I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying the podcast so much, and I'm so happy that I did this. So yeah, make sure that you leave a positive comment and review. It'll make my day, and it will help boost our ratings and algorithm, and hopefully more people will listen. And yeah, if you want to check me out on other social media platforms, you can look me up at JETEquiTheory. That's JETEquiTheory. I also have a website, JETEquiTheory.com. So you can find me there, or on Instagram, or on Facebook, or on YouTube, and all of the wonderful things. But I am about burnt out of energy. So thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. I hope that you have a wonderful evening and that you enjoyed. Also, if you had a wonderful day, I don't know what time it is where you are. It is very evening for me right now. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will catch you guys next Tuesday.